We're still finishing chapters 10 through 12 a touch as well today. But we'll get on to the next chapters today as well. So if you find your Bible and open it to Genesis, we'll be in chapter 9 to start a little bit, and then we'll start getting into
Chapter 9.
yes, I think I have the prior one
That's okay.
as well. You might have this one because this is the one we did for the last few weeks. All right. So we're going to continue on with chapters 6 through 9 just a little bit today. Really more just chapter 9 today, and then we'll get into chapters 10 through 12 here next. We'll answer kind of our last couple of questions. If I remember correctly, we had to finish up the questions on the bottom of the last lesson, which would have said, where is the word covenant used in the chapters, and what do you know about covenants, as our last one of our last questions. And am I missing another one, or is that it? Oh, and then sin has consequences. Explain what is seen in chapter 9. So those are the last two that I'm remembering. And just so you recall, too, if you are struggling with something, just ask, or, go back, listen to the class again. I've got the class loaded on YouTube. I have the class separated as well, so you can listen to just the class if you want. And even if you, just don't understand something yet, just give me a call and talk about it. Somebody did that with me recently, and I said, well, did you watch the class? And they said, I did. And I still don't get it, and that's okay. That was related to the Nephilim, right? So if you have questions, just ask, and we'll talk through. So the last thing we left off with was, where is the word covenant used in the chapters, and what do you know about covenants? So where do we see the word covenant used in our chapters here? And let's just define that first. Where are the two locations that you see covenant in Genesis 6 through 9? Did you find them?
9:9 and 9:12.
Right, so 9:9, and then there's also 9:12 is the same occurrence. But what about earlier mention in chapter 6?
16.
And is it 16 or 18? Somewhere in there, you see covenant used as well. So that's the first, of course, we're in the book of Genesis, right? So the first book of the Bible. And the first time we see the word covenant used. So I wanted to spend some time looking at what is a covenant, and what do you know about covenants? And let's just get this kind of defined. Genesis 6 and Genesis 9, are those different covenants, or are they the same covenant? What do you think? Genesis 6:18 says, I'll establish my covenant with you. You'll enter the ark, your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. And then Genesis 9, he says, God says, behold, I'll establish my covenant with you, all your descendants after you. Are those the same covenant, or are they different ones? Any thoughts there?
I would say that's the same covenant.
Yeah. I initially, when and in times past, you read that, you kind of look like, well, I think there may be separate covenants, but really, Genesis 6, he's saying, but I will establish my covenant with you. So I think God's saying, I'm going to establish my covenant. And then in chapter 9, he does. So I see those as the same covenant. That's why I wanted to establish that first. If you disagree, that's totally fine. We can discuss it. But I think they're the same covenant myself. So what do you know about covenants? Have you studied them before? Have you heard that word before? And what does it mean when somebody says to you, a covenant? What does that mean? Even just your own thoughts or scripture at face value. An agreement? Between two. Okay. An agreement between parties. Contract. Okay. Promise. Okay. Any other words or any other thoughts?
Blood pact.
A blood pact? Can be. Yeah. Can be, yeah.
Covenants weren't made just between God and people. They were made between people and amongst themselves.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right, so two parties, right, typically. Whether it's God and man or it's man and man. Multiple parties, right? All right. Anything else? Just curious what you know about them.
It's binding.
Binding. Okay. So there's some. Oh, how would you say it? There's some stake to it, or yeah, seriousness about it. It's not just a casual agreement or something like that. What is all involved? Based on some of those words, even I think we have some of it. But what goes into a covenant? So we have two parties. What all goes into a covenant?
There's usually, there's an obligation. There's obligation on both sides.
Yeah. So there's an agreement or obligation on both sides. Okay. What else? Just curious what you've seen in the Bible. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, there's often conditions related to the covenant.
Yeah.
And of course, the covenant is binding. And sometimes people break covenants, but the thing about God is that He does not break His covenants. So He keeps His covenants. And I was thinking of Hebrews 6, where He said He made a promise. This we'll get to later, but it's in the form of a covenant that He makes. And He said that He cannot lie. And so that is, it is impossible for God to lie. We can have strong encouragement to take hold of the hope set before us. So just to think of when God makes a covenant, we can be sure that He's going to fulfill His commitment to the covenant.
Yeah. Unlike maybe if we made a covenant with another person, maybe they would not follow through, right? Go ahead, Mark. Okay. Yeah. Typically, there's some sort of here's one source I found. This is how people break them down. I'm just relaying information and what I've studied. There's some sort of preamble. If you've heard of a preamble, there's background information, right? History and identification. There's some sort of stipulations in the covenant between the parties, right? There's typically a storage or depository, a place where the covenant is stored, and so we can look at it and remember, right? There's generally witnesses to covenants too, right? So somebody's going to witness. Did you have witnesses when you signed your marriage covenant? Maybe if you were married, did you have witnesses? Did you have people watching and signing with you? Okay. Did you have co-signers when you bought that, first car that you probably shouldn't have bought, and you had your parents co-sign or something, right? So you have witnesses, right? People that they're involved with it, right? Covenants might come with consequences or blessings, even, right? So covenants can sometimes mean blessings that come with them, or maybe there's consequences in breaking that covenant, right? And then a covenant is typically sealed with something. Have you noticed that? And have you noticed that in Scripture? Covenants are typically sealed with something. All right, so that's just an example of one person's thoughts on it. And there's different ways of looking at them too. But Genesis 9, if we look at the covenant, the rainbow covenant is what it's called a lot, right? In Genesis 9. So what's if you would think of like the preamble, the background story, who's all involved in this covenant in Genesis 9? You can look around verse 9, maybe verse 10. Who's all involved?
All living things.
Yeah, with you and your descendants after you, and even every living creature, right? He says. So basically, it's between God and life. There's a good way of putting it. Between God and life, right? Okay. Any questions on that? Right. So that's who it's between. What were some of the stipulations or the parts of the agreement? Look at maybe 11. What did God say in 11? You know it. Every time you see the rainbow, you say it, don't you? I'm never going to flood the earth again. And that means I'm never going to, really, what does that mean? I'm never going to destroy it in this manner, right? I'm never going to destroy all earth in this manner again. Okay, I'm never going to flood the earth again and destroy it. Okay, so that's one of the stipulations. Other parts of it, if you kind of seems maybe a little tricky to add this in, but I think it's part of it. Man is allowed to eat animals now, which is maybe could be included in the covenant, right? Where before they weren't, and animals will fear men, and animals are men are allowed to eat animals, which is something that was not happening before that, right? And then also whoever sheds man's blood, we talked about that in 6. By man's blood he shall be shed. And so there's even some aspects of this covenant where God's outlining some details of what he feels about death and life, right? Which makes sense because he's just destroyed all of life except for Noah and his family, right? So now he's making more details on what he feels about life. Go ahead.
It's a perpetual reminder.
Okay. So there is a reminder. So that reminder, that would be maybe like the depository. It's where the covenant's stored. And this one's very unique, and we all love the Rainbow Covenant because God reminds us through the rainbow, right? So every time we see rainbow, we remember that covenant. So that's our reminder of that covenant. It'd be like taking the, taking the contract out of the folder, right? And looking at it and reading it, pulling it up again. Every time we see the rainbow, we remember that aspect of the covenant, right? And it's a great reminder. There's so many teaching moments, if you have children and even with friends and family maybe that don't believe, this is what rainbow really means, right? Somebody had their hand up over here. Is that you, Mike?
Yeah. I find it really just personal, I guess, that God says that he will look on the rainbow and remember it.
Yeah, right. What verse is that again?
Let's see, 15
Is that 15? Yeah. I will remember my covenant. Yeah.
or 16.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll look upon it and remember that 15 and 16, but yeah, it's 15 and 16. Great point. So that really puts an emphasis on the aspect that there's two parties involved, right? It's not a one-sided covenant. It's between us and God, and he's going to remember his side of the covenant, okay? Are there any blessings in this covenant? Any blessings as a result? What about verse 7? What does God want man to do, and what will happen to man after this covenant? Or as a result? He's not going to destroy the creation again, so what's going to happen? Be fruitful and multiply, he says, right? So there's blessings involved there as well. All right? And there is much more little details that we can give here, but that's the most common covenant that we first study and we read about and we understand, right? So why do I want to focus on this covenant? Are we going to see covenants more in Scripture? Are we going to see covenants more in Genesis? Yes, we are. Okay? Yes, we are. In the time that we have, just to fast forward a little bit, we could get into more covenants, I think, but what about the covenant that we have with God through Christ? Do you want to talk about that one? Does that relate here? Was God foreshadowing in Genesis even already and future covenants? Was he already foreshadowing that he makes agreements with his people and that he was going to make an agreement with his people as it regards to Christ? I think so. So what do you think about that covenant, and what are the stipulations? What is the history? What is the seal? What is what are the blessings? What are the commitments of our covenant that we have with God through Christ? Somebody want to start us off on that? Hopefully you know some of them. I know quite a few of you that are believers and are baptized and have put on Christ, so hopefully you got that part figured out. Anybody want to share? So who are the parties involved in the covenant that we have with God?
Christ in us.
Yeah, okay, so Christ and us. All right, so we're involved, right? Christ is involved, all right? What's the, let's see, what are some of the stipulations of our covenant with us in Christ? What is expected?
To follow his commandments.
Okay, so some obedience, right? All right. What did Christ do for us? He died for us, right? So that's his part. Okay, so then we have, if it's a covenant, we have our part, right? So his part of the covenant was to die for us and shed his blood for us, and we can talk about what the blood means in the covenant. So we have our responsibilities. I'm just trying to look up a verse here, if that's the one I want or not. Let's see, I was going to go to Hebrews, but I'm not finding the right spot, I think.
9:15 starts into
Yeah, that's one of them. That's not the one. But yes. For this reason, he's a mediator of a new covenant in 9:15, so that since the death has taken place for the redemption and the transgression that were committed under the first covenant, those who have been called may receive the promise of an eternal inheritance. So there's an example of the blessings of the covenant. Do we receive blessings through that covenant? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And one of those blessings is listed there in 9 of Hebrews. There's lots of other ones that we can find too. Okay, and then this covenant was sealed with what? I mentioned it earlier. His blood, yeah. This covenant sealed with his blood, as others were in the past. Other covenants were sealed with blood in the past, and the covenant that we have with Christ is also sealed with blood. It just happens to be the perfect blood of the Lamb, as we so often mention. So if we look at other passages, I'm just trying to think, find some different ones to look at. But
related to this one, you're
yeah, go ahead.
in the 8th chapter, verse 10, this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after those days. I will put my laws into their minds.
I'll be there.
I will write them on their hearts. And so on.
Where is this covenant stored?
Well, he's written it upon our hearts and minds.
All right.
It's of course deposited in the Bible as well, and in the mind of God.
Yeah, this covenant is, we have it written down for us, but we also have it uniquely, as that passage mentions, it's uniquely stored in our hearts and our minds, which is a very unique, storage location, if you will, for a contract, if you want to think of it that way, like a covenant. Okay, but he expects service out of us, righteousness out of us, following his commandments as part of our side of the covenant. Okay, let's keep going a little bit. There's blessings. Let's see. We already talked about some of the blessings and curses. Well, we talked about the blessings. Would there be any curses or any consequences to this covenant?
If we break the covenant, we end up in hell.
Yeah, Jesus said, "Depart from me, I never knew you." Right. So Jesus says himself that. Where is that? Is that Luke 23, or is that? I'm trying to remember what chapter that is. But did we not cast out demons in your name? Did we not perform miracles in your name? He says, "Depart from me, I never knew you." Right. So possibly, if we're not fulfilling our side of the covenant by being putting him on in baptism, serving him, living in righteousness, we could have consequences to the covenant, or as a result of the covenant. And so there are both blessings and consequences. Do we like the blessing side of the covenant, or do we like the consequences side of the covenant more? Which side do you like better? Be honest. It's okay. We all like the blessing side of the consequence or the covenant better, right? Nobody likes to hear about the negative side of it, but there is a negative side to it. Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, if you end up in the consequence side, you're not part of the covenant anymore.
Yeah.
The New Testament is very clear. There first has to be belief. Without belief, we can't be a part of the covenant in the first place.
Yeah.
And it goes from there.
There's lots of passages to look at. Here's one in Luke 9, 23. If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily. Now we could talk about their signs of this covenant. So with the rainbow covenant, there was the sign of the rainbow, right? I think for this covenant, one sign that we could look at maybe would be the cross. Now, I'm not saying, having the cross as, a visible emblem. I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm saying the event of the cross, the actions of the cross, and understanding what happened at the cross. That sacrifice that he made for us is our sign. And Jesus says here, if you want to come after me, you need to deny yourself and take up your cross daily. So that cross becomes even a sign to us to remind us to take up our cross daily and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever wishes to lose his life for my sake, he is the one who will save it. For what is a man profited if he gains the whole world and loses or forfeits himself? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man will be ashamed of him when he comes in glory, and the glory of the Father and of the holy angels. But I say to you truthfully, there are some of those standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God. So Jesus makes pretty bold statements in chapter 9 of Luke, how he feels about the covenant and what he says will happen. We can not be willing to remember that cross and remember our side of the covenant, our actions, and he says we can lose our soul, right? So there's clearly two parts to the covenant, with our covenant with Christ. Any other thoughts or comments with the covenant?
Just the thought of
Go ahead, Mike.
the blood as the sign of the covenant. You mentioned the
Yeah.
cross, of course, related, obviously, but if you think of the rainbow, when he looks upon that, that made me think of when the Israelites were put the blood on their doorposts, and he said, "When I see the blood, I will pass over you." We sing that song, of course, and so when we eat the Lord's Supper, that's our reminder of the blood, but it's also God as he sees the blood in that sense applied to our lives, then he is going to pass over us in the judgment of condemnation.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the Lord's Supper next, but I think the Lord's Supper, sometimes taking it weekly, I think it's pretty easy for us to forget the significance of the covenant, and I think the Lord's Supper helps us remember aspects of that. Go ahead.
Do you think there's more power in one covenant over another? I feel like the covenant we have with Christ is the ultimate covenant, but I don't know if one carries more weight.
Well, let's go back to Hebrews. I guess I don't know about the carrying of weight, I would say, but in this case, prior covenant was replaced. Right? So if you go back to Hebrews chapter 9, the first covenant had its regulations and divine worship. That's how he starts chapter 9. So what he's writing there to the Hebrews is is trying to get them to understand that there was a covenant that you had with God, but now that covenant has been replaced. So in that sense, Gail, I think, let's say it is much better. Yes, it is it is a much better covenant we have in Christ, but really it's replaced covenant of past, right? So, but there are also covenants that are still ongoing. Is the rainbow covenant, has that been replaced or changed or? Nope. So that covenant's still going. Yeah, right. So there are aspects there, I think, Gail, where I'm sure glad about the rainbow covenant, aren't you? Yes, but I'm also really glad about the covenant of Christ too. So yeah, I guess so. The covenant of Christ is much greater or better than the covenant, the rainbow covenant, but I'm glad for both as well. So I like to eat meat. No, that's one part of it, right? I'm glad that he's decided to be patient with man, right?
I think the shedding of blood makes it like the ultimate.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it ultimate in the sense that the shedding of the blood was the blood of Christ, right? So, yeah, that's what makes it the ultimate shedding of blood. Hebrews really, let's see. If you look at, how is it in chapter 9? It talks about the greater, how the blood is greater. It's several chapters, but I know in chapter 9 he talks about the superiority of the blood. And
18.
is it 18? Yeah. So that definitely pinpoints it's a greater, a better blood than any blood that was shed or sacrificed before. Robert?
They all extend life,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So the covenant of the rainbow, it extends life, it produces life.
Yeah.
Even the old covenant,
True.
When they were faithful, they were,
Yeah, that's
they
funny.
were unmolested from their enemies, and they weren't hunted down and taken out, and it produces life.
And lots of the parts of the old law, very interestingly, now you say that, makes me think a lot of the parts of the old law had to do with keeping the people alive, right?
When they
Cleanliness and diseases and
Well, not only that,
Even
when they
that.
broke the covenant,
Yeah.
they brought the Assyrians, Babylonians, right? They destroyed life,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
they all extend life.
extending life. Yeah,
And
it's a
the
good
final
observation.
is the extension of the final covenant.
Good observation. Go ahead, Mike.
The 8th chapter of Hebrews and verse 6 makes it quite clear that the new covenant is better.
Yeah.
He has obtained a more excellent ministry
There it is. Thank you.
by as much as he is also the mediator of a better covenant,
Yeah.
which has been enacted on better promises. So,
Yeah.
clearly, the new covenant is superior to the covenant of Moses, and of course, it's the final and everlasting covenant, which means that there won't be another to be superior to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I knew it was right there in 8 or 9. I just couldn't get my eyes on it quick enough. Behold, look at verse 8. For finding fault with them. So God says for finding fault with them. He found fault with that covenant. All right. Okay, I think we're going to need to move forward so we can get into our next work. If you have more questions or thoughts on covenants, we're going to be coming into more covenants again. So I think we should probably move on since we're going to see further covenants as well. So what happens in chapter 9? Sin has consequences. What do we see in chapter 9? So as soon as this is Genesis chapter 9, I should probably turn there. I'm in Hebrews. All right. So and with the question, I'm referring to the water receding. Right. Noah comes out of the ark, and then what happens soon after that?
Sin enters in again.
Yeah, sin enters in again, right? So Noah begins farming. He plants a vineyard, right? You know the story. Hopefully you read it ahead of time. He drinks the wine. He's drunk. He's naked in his shame in his tent. And two of the sons handle it better than the other, right? So who handles it better? Shem and Japheth. And then Ham doesn't handle it so well. Really Ham just, I don't know how you picture it. Maybe he goes in, oh, that's funny. I'm going to go tell my brothers. I don't know. I'm just making it more our language or more our, today's world. But he doesn't make any effort to honor his father or protect his father. He just goes and tells the other ones, hey, come check out what Dad did, kind of thing, right? He's being a ham. Yeah, right. He just doesn't understand the seriousness of it, right? And so unfortunately, Noah makes a mistake. He sins. Ham makes a mistake. Maybe we could say he sins. But Shem and Japheth, they lay their garments upon their shoulders. You kind of picture them walking backwards. We don't want to see this. We don't want to shame our father. And they protect him. So that's all what happens. And so sin has its consequences. So what's going to be the consequence of that? It's listed in 9. And we'll see this now as we get into chapters 10 through 12. Was there any consequence to Ham and his decision?
Yeah, he got cursed.
Yeah. So we're going to see the future, and we'll talk about this in the next chapters, the descendants of Noah and the world as it gets established after this time. And we're going to see nations after Ham. Ham was the father of what nation that we're going to see throughout the Old Testament, the Canaan and the Canaanites, right? And it says there, cursed be Canaan.
Noah got a broken up family.
Yeah.
Right. So his actions, right away we have a lesson about drunkenness.
Yeah.
Right. So that caused it because he let his guard down.
Yep.
And the consequences brought other sin involved.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, so we've already mentioned this a few times, this concept of, generational consequences and generational actions and things that happen, in one generation that carry through to others. And this is just one example that we see. All right, so let's move into chapters 10 through 12, because that's a good segue. And I didn't even... You guys will have to help me out. I gave all of you the lesson. And I didn't give myself. No, I gave myself one. I just forgot to. I forgot to print it out. So let's jump into chapters 10 through 12. So 10, 11, and 12. What do we see? Let's just kind of overview the chapters real quick, and then we'll start getting into it. What do we see in chapter 10? Mostly genealogy, right? Kind of background information. And I asked a question on that. We'll get into that next, I think, because it makes sense based on what we talked about. But we see genealogy in chapter 10. Chapter 11, what would you title that chapter, or what do you see in chapter 11? The Tower of Babel, right? Tower of Babel. And then in chapter 12, we first see whom? And we're going to see a lot of them for a while. Abram, right? Who will become, and we'll discuss that later, Abraham, right? And we see Abram in 12. So this is the next couple of chapters. All right, so chapter 10, let's start getting in there. Again, we have, coming out of the ark, we have Shem, Ham, and Japheth, right? So in chapter 10, we are seeing what? The spread of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, right? So chapter 10 really is, my Bible even titles it The Descendants of Noah, right? So my Bible titles it The Descendants of Noah. And so we see Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And you see there the sons of Japheth were Gomer and Magog and Madai and Javan. Somewhere I read seems to be, there was a Greek connection there. Those end up being Greek connections for Greece. Okay, and then we have Ham. We already mentioned Ham. What major nation that we're going to see later on? It would be the Canaanites, right? That descends from Ham. And then the last one, Shem. What's significant about Shem? And you could take it, I guess, from here and anywhere else in Scripture if you want to as well. So what's the significance of Shem then?
I had his descendants were Abraham, David, and Jesus.
Yeah, so Shem is going to continue with that lineage, and again, trying to make this point throughout this lesson so far today and past lessons. The genealogy is important as genealogies in the Old Testament point forward all the way to the time of Christ. So it's very important for us to understand who we're talking about in the Old Testament so we can understand who we're talking about in the New Testament. Okay? So in Genesis 11 here, we see Shem and his lineage listed in 21 and following. Okay? But if we go to the New Testament, I've lost my notes, so somebody help me out. Where are we going to find Shem and what lineage is he in the New Testament? What book is he in? Where is he? Which genealogy is what I'm trying to find? Is he in Matthew's or Luke's? Is he in Luke's? There it is. Luke chapter 3. Sorry. I forgot to. You guys got to help me out. I didn't print my notes. Luke chapter 3. I found it. I beat you. Unless some of you said it and I didn't hear it. So Luke chapter 3 is the genealogy where we see Shem listed there. It actually goes. So in Luke's genealogy, it goes backwards from the time of from Christ, and it goes backwards to Adam. Right. So if you go. The end of chapter 3 and read backwards, right? You'll see Shem there, 36. So we see Lamech, again, we mentioned Lamech earlier, and then we see Noah, and then we see Shem. Okay? All right. So that's that genealogy in Genesis that carries into genealogy in Luke. Okay? So again, why do we study, Genesis? Why do we study the Old Testament? Why do we study these things? Because they're our tutor, is what the Bible tells us. So the Bible tells us that the old law, for example, we're not reading the old law right now, but there was law at this time. So God gives us these things as our tutor. Why does he give us these things? He wants us to ultimately find his son so that we can partake in the covenant with his son. And that's why this stuff is all so important, right? All right. And then 32. These are the families of the sons of Noah. So look at the verse 32 of chapter 10. These are the families of the sons of Noah according to their genealogies by the nations. And out of these, the nations are separated on the earth after the flood. And so what happens? That's what I want to establish here. What happens after the flood, right? The nations on the earth will start to spread and expand. Okay? And we're going to see that in verse 11 as well. Okay? And verse 11 really is verse 11. Chapter 11 is what I'm trying to say. Chapter 11 is really tied in with the end of chapter 10, right? And so you could really say these nations spread out and were separated as a result of, in chapter 11,
confusing the language.
yeah, who caused that spread to happen, right? God did, yeah. So we'll read about that with the Tower of Babel. God caused this spread to happen, okay? So 11, we are introduced to the Tower of Babel. Okay, now, interestingly enough, in 11 and also at starting at verse 10, we see some more of what? More genealogies, right? So we see more genealogies with Shem in chapter 11. Okay? And we see that spreading into the descendants of Shem, and then that gets us all the way down to our next important figure, which is going to be Abram, that we're going to see in chapter 11 and 12. Okay? And so more descendants of Shem. All right. So let's get into chapter 11 just briefly, and then we'll have to close here. All right. So what happens in the Tower, the story of the Tower of Babel here? The start of it, chapter 11, the whole earth used the same language, which is a very unique and very peculiar conversation, right? And we're not familiar with that today. Are we familiar with that today? Not really, other than maybe to say that the English language is one of the most common ones used around the world, right? But we don't use the same language today, do we? Go ahead, Bruce.
Did you say last week you like tough questions?
Oh boy, should I write this one down? I got it recorded, so go ahead.
Chapter 10
Yeah.
says, coastlands of the nations were separated.
What verse are
several I'm not going to refer to it, but it just says several places in chapter 10.
Yeah.
According to their languages.
Yeah.
Languages. All of a sudden in chapter 11, verse 1, the whole earth used the same language.
Yeah, so-
How did we get there?
Well, I kind of answered that already. You must not have been listening.
No.
So I think chapter 11, is really describing what happens in chapter 10. Or chapter 10, sorry. I said that backwards. I think what's happening in chapter 10 is he's showing what happens in chapter 11 after the Tower of Babel. Those descendants go out.
I'm not talking before that. I'm asking before that.
With man being created too, right? He explains it after, the chapter after.
Yeah, I think that's what so I think what's happening is the way that it's written, I think, and I could be wrong. I'll go back and read more about it for next time now. But I think what's happening in 11 is with that description of the Tower of Babel and what happens with the Tower of Babel, I believe that is describing really what's happening in 10, right? So the 10, the nations go out and they spread and they have their own lands and they have their own languages as a result of God confusing their languages in 11. But I could have that wrong, but I think that's how I understand it.
Well, verse 1 said they had the same language.
Right. No, I understand, yeah. Yeah, I think it's just written, just go like this, and then it'll make more sense. Flip it a little bit. Yeah.
If you picture the fact that they were all in one place at the Tower of Babel, that sort of necessitates that they hadn't yet divided out into those lands, the coastlands, various places. So we have to have them we have to at least understand it correctly.
Right.
They have to be in one place. And then part of the reason that he was upset with them, we'll get to that, is they were not filling the earth.
Correct.
They were multiplying, but not filling the earth.
Yeah, so why was it, why was it written that way? I don't know. I think maybe the writer felt the need to list the genealogies of and descendants of Noah first and before getting to the Tower of Babel. But that's just the way it's written, I believe. So, all right. So next time here's what I want you to do. I want you to be ready for, we didn't have time for it, so I didn't start there. I want to talk about altars. Why altars? Because we saw one or two of them already. And if you're doing your reading, you'll see it. Make sure you're reading ahead. Read 10 through 12. Maybe even in 13 would be helpful. But be ready to discuss altars. That's kind of a big question. What are they and why? We're going to see a lot of that throughout Genesis. So be ready to discuss altars. And then answer the other questions that are on the sheet as well. And then, of course, if you haven't yet, invite somebody to class. All right. That's all we have time for.